Chapter minus 35.53, Home, by Minnow, written in indigo ink. In case you haven't read our first book, my name is Minnow, and I'm 11. I'm named after a fish, although you've probably never even heard of a minnow. It's a little fish, and not very well known. It's weird to be named after a fish, but my whole family is a bit weird. We live in an old church, so maybe that's why. When I wrote this chapter, Frank, Ben, Sky and I had just returned to Van Diemen's Island after our first set of adventures on the Islands of Time. We were so pleased to be home, but we were exhausted. It felt as if we'd bush-bashed our way out of an enormous wild forest, or maybe we'd come back from sailing around the world in 7 days. We'd been to heaven and we'd been to hell. It felt as if all the foul things in the universe had tried to ruin Sky's life, and Ben's, but they'd failed utterly. Our first set of adventures ended on the same day Sky and I turned 11. We were both born on the very same day, and even though it felt like I'd known Sky forever, I'd met her less than a year before. And I'm so glad we met. It was Sky's idea to write about our adventures. When she first thought of writing our books, she and I were on the swings under the huge tree at the front of the old stone church where I live. It was the day after we got back, and it was one of those days when hours seem like years and minutes turn into weeks. I kept imagining time to be a massive dragon resting on the grass beside us, dreaming of moonlight and wizards, magic carpet rides, and vast fields of space where stars can move from galaxy to galaxy without anyone noticing. We were all enjoying that most marvellous of things, doing nothing. All around us birds were gliding past and large grasshoppers bounced by as if nothing could go wrong anywhere ever again. While we were swinging, Sky's mass of red hair kept dancing in the light. I leaned backwards so I could swing up really high. As I came down, Sky sat bolt upright on her swing, looking really excited. "We have to write about our adventures. We must. We could make it into a book, or lots of them." I couldn't believe my ears. "Yes," I said, "of course." Sky looked thoughtful. "Will it ever be good enough, though, in words?" I smiled, thinking she didn't know much. "Once words get onto the page," I said, "they find their way into the mind, and once they're in there, anything can happen." Sky nodded. "Minds are magic." I grinned. "Minds are demons." I suddenly felt as if anything was possible. Swinging up into the blue and back down into the dappled green of the garden. Sky was saying yes, 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 as she hung upside down, letting her hair brush against the ground. I did the same, my long brown plait becoming a snake as it slithered through the grass. "Maybe we can make the story into a film," suggested Sky, "for people who can't read." "And for people who love films better than books," I said. "Plus, it'll make it easier to explain your wings." Sky laughed, making her wings visible and flaring them out really wide. The feathers are dark near her back and become super golden towards the ends, where they splay out like fingers. "I hadn't thought of that," she said. "No one will ever believe that an ordinary girl has wings." I smiled. "You're not exactly ordinary. And anyway, we'll explain how you got your wings. We'll put you on one of the covers. That way people will know about your wings right from the start." "Yes," said Sky. "We can all do the drawings, and we'll make maps for the books, and little flying fish to float around in the words. And fairies too," said Sky. We both swung up as high as we could, and then Sky swooped down really fast, letting her wings trail on the ground. "Come on," she said, jumping from her swing, "to the ink." We both ran into the old church and raced one another up the spiral staircase. The stairs are wooden and have the smoothest handrail. When we ran our fingers along the railing, it made a whirring sound, as if it was a wheel spinning out of control. My bedroom is right at the top of the church's tower. When we pulled open the doors, the sun was shining in through the lead light, making patterns all over my quilt. Outside, through the big arched window, we could see ocean gulls floating on the breeze and the sea heaving slowly up and down as if it was a sleeping monster breathing. "Okay," said Skye, "we'll both write what we can remember of our adventures and then we'll check things with Ben and Frank. They'll tell us stuff that happened when we weren't with them. And we can fit it all together." I couldn't stop smiling as I filled my fountain pen with indigo ink. "I'm writing in red," said Skye, grabbing a bottle with a picture of Mars on it. "It'll match my hair and suit the bloodiness in my part of the story." "Gross," I said. "I'm using indigo. Uncle Jim says that stories written in indigo take readers on a magical journey." Skye grinned. "Words written in red take people to outer space and make them think of Mars." I laughed. "If you say so." "I know so," said Skye. "Now, we can't write on ordinary paper. Can we use some of your big scrapbooks?" "Yes," I said, pulling them out from underneath the wardrobe. When we opened them, Skye said, "Oh, I love the pages, all creamy like old parchment." As our hands pushed our pens across the paper, our eyes were dancing. Every so often, Skye would splash red ink onto my pages for luck, and I'd splatter indigo onto hers for the best and most super luck. Perhaps our stories would be better than our adventures. Who could say? But perhaps, just perhaps, they would. In case you haven't read our first book, be warned. There'll be some spoilers in a moment. We couldn't tell you much at the beginning of the time virus, or we'd have spoiled the surprise about meeting Blizzard and going off with him to surf the Noesis, and how we found new friends at Mareska Mar, and the truth about how bad the time virus is. If you've read our first book, you'll know that Mareska Mar is the university on the main island of time, Ephinox, and anyone can go there, from babies right through to people who are tens of thousands of years old. The Noesis is all the clouds for miles and miles above the islands of time. They're thick and full of magic and knowledge, and you can surf them as well. Surfing the Noesis is like a cross between snowboarding and surfing. It's like nothing you've ever done before. So much fun. When we were writing the time virus, right at the beginning, we couldn't tell you how evil Isla and Filthy were. We didn't want to spoil the story. But now you know everything. Also, we changed the title of our book lots of times. It was the Time Virus, and then the Time Plague, and then we called it the Time Game. We liked all the names, but in the end it returned to being called the Time Virus. But sometimes we split it into two parts, the Time Again Game, all about the game Frank and I created and how we met Skye and Ben, and then Islands of Time, where we met the best people and finally knew how to put Skye back together again. And mostly now, it's just the Time Virus. It's fun writing stories, but there are so many decisions to make. Anyway, on to our next set of adventures. They've been just as much fun as our first adventures, even though some sad things happened. This time, Frank and Ben are writing the main part of the story. Skye and I decided that it was their turn. Also, we wanted to do some more programming for the Time Again game, or TAG for short. Plus, we wanted to play the game as well, and add in all the things that happened while we were away. We want you to be able to play it soon too, so we have to make everything excellent. In case you've not read our first book, Frank's my cousin. He's 12. I'd only just turned 11 when the adventures in this book began, and so had Sky. As you know, we share exactly the same birth date. Sky's brother Ben is the same age as Frank, but they weren't born on the same day. Frank and I invented the Time Again game, which is the best computer game in the whole wide universe. We taught Ben and Sky to code and program, so with all of our input, the game is getting better and better all the time. Anyway, I have to hand over the writing to Frank and Ben now, so I hope you really enjoy reading about our adventures. Living them was wild and so much fun. I recommend that you read this book. You will not regret it. Minnow. P.S. You can play the Time Again game as soon as it goes online. Hopefully, that won't take us too long.